Hey everyone and welcome. I'm Locke. You can think of me as your guide for this deep dive. Like that friend who can't get enough of those fascinating biographies.
And I'm Demosthenes, happy to be joining you.
And today we are tackling a real-life story that reads like, well, a political thriller,
Oh, absolutely. We're diving into the rise of Xi Jinping.
drawing insights from a video on the YouTube channel at MSLBF.
And let me tell you, this is no ordinary political biography. Get ready for some twists and turns.
Okay, so let's set the stage here. We're talking about China during the Cultural Revolution, a time of massive upheaval, and young Xi Jinping right in the middle of it all.
And it's impossible to overstate how much this period shaped him. Imagine being branded a gangster's son, because that's what happened when his own father, Xi Jinping, was caught in a purge labeled a counter-revolutionary.
Whoa, okay, hold on. I know a bit about the Cultural Revolution, but what does counter-revolutionary actually mean in that context? It sounds intense.
It was incredibly serious. It wasn't just disagreeing with the government. This was about being on the wrong side of a whole political movement. People accused of being counter-revolutionaries faced persecution, imprisonment, even death.
That's heavy stuff.
Absolutely. So for Xi Jinping as a teenager, this was a harsh lesson in just how brutal politics could be.
Wow, no wonder the source material says this experience made him cautious and shaped his leadership style.
Right, when we think about his focus on loyalty and control within the party, for Xi Jinping, these weren't just abstract ideas, they were tied to his family's survival.
And you can see echoes of that in some of his policies now, right? Like the anti-corruption campaign, it tackled a real problem, but also helped him consolidate power.
Exactly. It's a complex legacy. But going back, imagine that pressure being labeled an enemy of the state and then at just 15 years old facing threats of execution.
Wait, seriously, that actually happened.
The source material says yes. And it makes you wonder how anyone comes back from that kind of trauma, let alone goes on to lead a nation.
It's mind-blowing. So to escape the chaos in Beijing, he's sent to work in Liangjia village. And this isn't some relaxed summer camp experience. We're talking back-breaking labor.
Yeah, Liangjia is crucial to understanding Xi Jinping. From 1969 to 1975, he was a world away from the centers of power, facing incredibly harsh conditions. Even he admitted it was a shock.
It wasn't just the physical challenges either. The source mentions a dangerous encounter with a burst methane pit, not your typical political science lecture material.
Right. It paints a picture of this young man really tested to his limits. He actually tried to escape, went back to Beijing, only to be sent right back to Lianjie.
Like something out of a movie.
Mm.
But even in that difficult environment, he found ways to grow. The source mentions how he sought comfort in reading, even trading precious eggs for borrowed books.
That's a detail that stands out. It speaks to a certain resilience, a thirst for knowledge that even that hard labor and political exile couldn't crush.
I see what you mean. You start to see how those experiences might shape someone's worldview, their ambition. But how does he go from carrying wheat in Lianjie to the halls of power in Beijing? That's a big leap.
It is. And it involves some luck, a twist of fate, and something else that might surprise you, his university application. We talk about how tough it is to get into top universities today, right? Well, imagine that pressure multiplied by the political craziness of 1970s China. For Xi Jinping, getting into university wasn't just about academics, it was about navigating a minefield of political factions.
Sounds intense. So how does a young man with his background, branded a gangster's son, sent away to hard labor, even get looked at by a place like Tsinghua University?
Remember, his father was a big deal in the party before he was purged. Those connections still mattered, even if they weren't guaranteed in Xi Jinping. He actually applied to Tsinghua 3 times.
3 times. Talk about persistence. What happened the first 2 times? Why was he rejected?
At that time, Tsinghua was under the control of 2 people who were really hardcore Cultural Revolution supporters, Qi Quan and Xi Jingyi. The source material doesn't get into all the details, but for whatever reason, they weren't keen on letting him in.
So it was political. Even with his dad's connections and his own record, these 2 individuals could block him.
Seems that way. But here's where it gets interesting. On his 3rd attempt in 75, the political landscape shifted. Remember Qi Quan and Xi Jingyi? They fell out of favor themselves, got caught up in a power struggle within the party.
Wow, talk about a lucky break. So it was being in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. Their loss was his gain. Someone else was in charge of admissions that year, a man named Liu Bing. And unlike the others, Liu Bing said yes.
So in a way, all those years of hardship being sent away to Liangjie, it might have actually protected him from some of the worst political infighting, allowed him to come back when things were shifting in his favor.
Now that's an interesting thought, isn't it? It shows how personal stories and big historical events can collide. But here's another twist. Xi Jinping ends up studying chemistry, of all things.
Chemistry. Really? Not exactly the typical path for a future leader, especially someone who was already interested in politics.
You're right, it's not the usual route. But remember, this was China going through huge changes. There was a big push for science and technology to help the country develop.
So maybe it made sense in that context.
Exactly. Having a degree from Tsinghua, no matter what it was in, carried a lot of weight. Open doors showed he had brains. And it was at Tsinghua that he made a connection that would become really important later on. He became friends with a guy named Chen Shi.
So this is where we start to see his political network taking shape.
Right. Chen Shi became a close friend, part of Xi Jinping's inner circle. That friendship they made at Tsinghua, it reminds us that who you know can be just as important as what you know.
Truth. Okay, so he graduates from Tsinghua, starts building his network. But how does he go from chemistry student to a career in politics? How does he actually get started in the Chinese Communist Party?
His first real step into that world was as a secretary. Doesn't sound too glamorous, but it was a lot more than it seemed.
A secretary. Tell me more. Who was he working for and what made this job so important?
This is where it gets juicy. He becomes a secretary to Geng Biao, a big player in the military and the government.
Hold on. So many questions. First of all, how did he land that job? Was Geng Biao known for taking young guys under his wing, or was there something more strategic going on?
Well, remember those family connections we talked about? Geng Biao was actually close with Xi Jinping's father, so there was a personal link there, a level of trust that probably helped. But it wasn't just about who his dad knew.
Right. There's got to be more to it than that.
Yeah.
So what made this mentorship so crucial for the young Xi Jinping?
Think of it like an apprenticeship at the very top of Chinese politics. Geng Biao wasn't just some random official. He was a veteran of the Long March, a respected military leader, and in 1979 he was both vice premier and the secretary general of the Central Military Commission. This wasn't making coffee. It was seeing firsthand how decisions were made, who the power brokers were, the inner workings of the system.
Wow, what an education.
Yeah.
Talk about learning the ropes. That's huge for someone with his ambitions.
Yeah.
But didn't you say Geng Biao eventually lost his position? What happened there, and how did it affect Xi Jinping's path?
You're right. Those political wins, they shifted again. In 1982, Deng Xiaoping, who was really consolidating his own power at the time he pushed Geng Biao aside, and this was a real crossroads for Xi Jinping. He wasn't the rising star in a powerful mentor's office anymore. He had to make a choice.
Okay, so what were his options then? This is where things get really interesting. What did this fork in the road look like for the man who would become China's paramount leader?
The source material talks about two paths open to him at that point. One was to take a job in local government, start from scratch somewhere new, prove himself all over again. This was, and to some extent still is, the typical path for ambitious people in the party. Work your way up from the bottom, show your loyalty, and that you can get things done.
So a risk, but also a chance to build his own power base outside of Beijing. Make a name for himself.
Exactly. And it wouldn't be some cushy job in a big city. Think more like a county-level position, probably out in a rural area, dealing with everyday problems, navigating local politics. It would have been a real test of whether he was serious about a career in the party. But there was another, even more interesting option for him at this time.
Okay, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. What was the alternative?
Remember, at this point, Xi Jinping was married to Kei Lingling?
Yeah.
And her father was the Chinese ambassador to the UK? He had a way out, a chance to leave the uncertainty of Chinese politics behind and start a new life in the West.
Wow, to give up everything he'd built, the connection, the potential to rise even higher for a life in the UK.
Yes,
a huge decision.
It is, and it says something about how things felt back then. China was just opening up, and the West, for all its problems, it held a certain appeal for a lot of people. There's even a quote in the source material from Wang Zhen, a high-ranking official who went to the UK in '78. He was blown away by the standard of living there, even said it was better than the lives of some high-up party members.
It makes you think about how heavy that choice must have felt. On one hand, a comfortable, stable life in the West. On the other, the wild ride of Chinese politics, but with the possibility of achieving something truly great, maybe even making it to the very top.
Exactly. And when it came down to it, he chose China, divorced his wife and took that county-level position, became the deputy party secretary of Zhending County in Hebei province. It was a gamble, but a calculated one. By staying the course, he showed his dedication to the party, his ambition, and in the end, his belief that he was destined for something big.
What a story. From facing execution as a teenager to navigating the ups and downs of Chinese politics, it's incredible to think about how Xi Jinping became the most powerful man in China. It really makes you think about how our own journeys are shaped by things we can control and things we can't.
It does, and it shows how important it is to understand the past if we want to make sense of the present. Xi Jinping's story, from those tough early years to the decisions he made as a young official, it gives us a new way to look at his leadership and where China's headed on the world stage. So much of what we see today, it has roots in those formative experiences, those times of resilience, ambition, and yeah, maybe even a bit of destiny.
This has been an incredible deep dive, and I hope you found it as fascinating as we have. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What surprised you the most about Xi Jinping's journey? What connections did you make to China's path today? Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.